I request Professor Sudhishiti sir to escort the dignitaries to the dais. Also, I welcome all my teaching and non-teaching colleagues, and also my dear students for this wonderful session. Professor will be addressing us on climate changes, challenges, importance of Western Ghats. Now, I call upon Mr. Ramakrishna Y B to take over the session's watches.
But I'll be presenting on biofuels tomorrow. I specially requested the organizers that this topic we introduced. Today is a session on water, and the importance of water is something that I would like to articulate through this presentation. And if you all know, one of the most debated topic at the global level is climate change. And we all know what climate change or global warming is about. Many a times, we will be hearing about it, but we would not have tried to really understand what exactly it means. So, as I said, climate change has become the most debated topic. Climate change has been one of the most debated topic at the global level. And when we talk about the climate change, global warming issues, the picture that is normally presented to us is that, the Arctic, the iceberg in the Arctic is melting, the sea level is going to go up, and a lot of low-lying land is going to get submerged under water if the water level goes up. And the other thing that is being told is that the global temperature, it is really going up, it is warming up. And the third thing that is being told to us is the carbon dioxide levels in the air is really going up. So these are some of the things. But the real effects of this global warming is something that is not well articulated, well debated, or well understood. But the seriousness has been understood by many countries, and at the global level, there have been some initiatives that were taken, and especially the Paris Agreement, where the scientists, the politicians, the bureaucrats, they all came together, and they wanted to reduce the temperature of the earth and just limit the rise. You can't reduce it, but you limit the rise to 1.5 degrees by end of this century. But again, all these kind of decisions that have been made are politically driven. Recently, President Donald Trump has pulled out of this agreement, and he feels that it is going to affect the developmental programs in his country. So there are a lot of controversies around the Paris Agreement and the way we should be dealing with the climate change issues. And we still have a whole lot of people who refuse to recognize this problem. And they think that, these are all some scientific data that we have, but then whatever is happening on the ground at the global level, it may not be really because of the climate change issues that we are really talking about. So that is where we stand with regard to climate change. I just want to tell you the kind of effects, the various kind of human activities in the last 150 years after our industrial revolution has resulted in putting out so much of greenhouse gases, which has really taken the temperature of the earth well above the normal levels, and because of which there are so many things that are happening. And the temperatures, as I said, year after year it has been raising, and 2016 was considered as one of the hottest year since 1880. That is, in the last 140 years or so, the earth had not really seen this kind of temperature. We have other serious issues also, but the importance of this climate change, or the seriousness of the climate change, is reflected in the issue that it has been recognized as the third most dangerous thing that's happening, most dangerous thing as far as the humanity is concerned. First, of course, is the terrorism and poverty-related issues. I need not have to dwell on that. You all know what terrorism and poverty issue is. Second one is hunger and providing food for the growing population. And water has become one of the biggest challenges. And they say that if the third world war is fought, it will be fought for water. So we have serious issues with water. And the third most serious issue is the climate change and the kind of effects that it has on the humanity. So as we all know, the Arctic Sea, the glaciers, they have been melting, and the sea levels have been rising, and the snow cover that we have lost, the ice coverage that we have lost in the last 30-40 years is almost about 3.5 to 4% of the total ice coverage and the glaciers that we have had. And sea levels have been rising, and many of the small islands have already disappeared. And when we talk about the sea level rising, it is expected that by end of this century, it is expected to go up by about 6 meters, which means that next to India, we have Bangladesh. Almost 2/3 of Bangladesh will be underwater. And many low-lying areas along the coast, whether it is Europe, North America, even India for that matter, many of the low-lying areas. And we all live here on the coast of Arabian Sea, and many of the low-lying areas here will also be coming under water whenever that happens. And another thing that is already happening is due to the various vagaries of nature, a lot of people are being displaced. And it's been told that since 2008, at the global level, for various reasons, and reasons being attributed only to climate change, there are something like 21.5 million people have been, have moved out from their natural habitat, and they have become refugees somewhere or the other. And it is expected by 2030 that number is going to double, that we are expecting something like 40 million people becoming refugees because of the kind of climate change reasons that we have. The other important thing is that if you really look at how much the earth can produce and how much is required for consumption for the human beings, this is a very kind of a scary situation. If you really look back some 20-25 years earlier, at the global level, whatever we produced was more than what we would consume in a particular year. Now we are told that the amount of consumption has gone up so much, and because of the climate change issues, the various production, including the food, has been coming down. And there is a certain graph, which I don't have it here, which says that if you really look 12 months in a year, we would have consumed whatever we are producing by August. And for the next 4 months, we really don't know how we are going to do. And what is happening right now is the countries like US, Canada, China, some of these countries, where you see very fast rate of growth, they have been consuming, and it's the rest of the world which has been providing for them. And now rest of the world is also looking in terms of growing like US, growing like Canada, growing like Europe, growing like China. And if that happens, and if that is the kind of GDP or the growth rate that we have, then whatever we produce is not going to be available for the equitable distribution is not there right now, but there won't be enough for all the people. And the other important thing is that, I don't know if you are aware of Great Barrier Reef in Australia. This is where, you find, mainly in Australia, you have a very shallow sea coast, and you find various types of corals. And now, because of the climate change and the temperatures going up, there are certain kind of new invading species which have come and which have started eating on corals, and the corals have started disappearing. And it is said that almost about 35% of the corals in that region has been lost. And the another scary situation is the ocean has become acidic by 26%. The pH factor has only increased by 0.1, but the acidity levels is increased by 26%. Just imagine if it becomes more acidic, that many of the aquatic life will be lost as we move forward. And then, of course, the flooding. I would like to really say, one is the sea levels being raising. The other one is that the rain pattern all over the world has changed. You all know that in Mumbai it rained something like 36, 38 inches in 24 hours time. There's a lot of water. The entire city of Mumbai was underwater, and it was 3 to 4 feet of water was there. Just about 7, 8 years ago, in a place like Gulbarga, where you don't even get something like 20 to 22 inches of rainfall in a year. About 50 centimeters of rainfall is what you get in a year. In that area, within a matter of 3 days, and this was also in the month of November, December, you had so much of rain that entire Gulbarga area was flooded, and it took almost about 15-20 days for the water to recede. And you see that this has seriously affected the agricultural practices, especially in the southern parts of Karnataka in India, where most of the agriculture that takes place is rain-fed agriculture in monsoon. We used to get, when we say monsoon, we used to get rain for in the 4 months of monsoon, we used to get rains for about nothing less than 50 days. It used to be spread over 50 to 100 days in different parts of the southern parts of India. But then we have seen that many places total rainfall remains the same, but the whole rainfall comes in 4 or 5 days time. And that, you can't do any kind of agriculture if that is the change in the kind of pattern of rainfall that you see. And what is happening is that that kind of rainfall only is resulting in floods. And you see this kind of phenomena all over the globe. Every day, if you look at global news, somewhere or the other there has been a heavy rain and there has been a flooding. And recently we have seen this happening in Texas, Florida, many places. It happened in a place like Dallas. Dallas is almost desert. They had floods. And I have a friend whose house was completely washed off, and the car, it started floating, and the car was found some 3 miles away from their house, what was parked in front of the house. That's the kind of flood they had seen. This is something that is in a global phenomena, and that's a result of one of the climate change issues. And of course, I did talk about the carbon dioxide levels going up, and the 400 parts per million is a very dangerous level, and which we reached in 2015, and we have not seen that it's going down. Year after year, it has only been going up, and new records are being broken. And as I mentioned, by end of this century, we are expecting something like 6 degrees, the average temperature of Earth to go up by 6 degrees. That will make all the kind of effects that we are talking about increase several folds. These are some of the pictures. See, for example, the first one, we are talking about forest fires. If you have read papers in the last 2-3 months, in place like California, from San Diego all the way up to northern California, there were several fires. Thousands and thousands of hectares of forest was lost because of this kind of fire. Like, flooding has been a global phenomena. Even the fires have been a global phenomena. Wherever the forests are there, we are losing forests because of very high temperature and not enough rainfall being there. And obviously, this picture talks about the rise in the sea levels. And here you see the Great Reef barrier that I mentioned about, the kind of coral that we have been losing. And then flooding has been a global phenomena. And the other important aspect that we have to look at is the desertification that is happening. All over the world, because we are losing forests and many of the land has become unproductive because you don't have proper rains or water sources for doing the cultivation, and we see this kind of desertification that is happening. And it is very scary that the Deccan Plateau, where we live, we are, people here are on the coast, but then you go up the Western Ghats and they have the Deccan Plateau. There, the desertification is happening at highest rate. Now, if you ask me, in India, after Rajasthan, which is the most desertific, land which has become desert, it is Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And the eastern parts of Karnataka and the western parts of Andhra and Telangana have fast becoming deserts. So this is another serious issue, and this again is a global phenomenon. A whole lot of countries are looking at their land turning into desert. And of course, this is a picture of in the Arctic how the ice has been breaking up and melting, and which has been the major cause for sea level rise. And this is the picture which shows how the snow has been melting on the mountains. This is a picture taken from the satellite, and several pictures have been superimposed here. But you can see how the glaciers have been melting at the global level, and the Iceland that we have probably has the maximum number of glaciers. Almost about 30% of the snow in the glaciers in Iceland have already melted, and if it goes by another 30%, then the sea water level is expected to go up by at least 1 to 1.5 meters. So it's quite a scary kind of a situation that we are in. Now I want to come to Western Ghats. The interesting thing is, we all know Western Ghats, but how many of you knew that Western Ghats is also called Sahyadri Ranges? Oh, quite a few. When you say Sahyadri, we all think that it's Sahyadri College, from where most of you come from. But the Western Ghats is also called Sahyadri Ranges. As you can see, it extends from all the way from Kanyakumari going up to Gujarat. You have the Tapi or the Tapati river that flows here, the south of Tapati river all the way up to Kanyakumari. And you see that this Western Ghats spreads in Tamil Nadu, you have Kerala, Karnataka, Goa, Maharashtra, as well as in Gujarat. It's very interesting to learn about this Western Ghats. Now, you see that it is parallel to the western coast, and this has been identified. There are several spots on this Western Ghats which have been identified as the World Heritage Site by UNESCO. And I told you, when we discuss about the climate change issues, there are spots on the globe which help in maintaining the climate or maintaining the temperature, because the forests that are there in those areas actually act as the carbon sink, and they absorb all the carbon dioxide that is there in the atmosphere. So at the global level, they have identified about 8 hotspots, and Western Ghats is one amongst these 8 hotspots at the global level. And Western Ghats has been identified as the hottest of the hotspots. Why is it so? That is something that I would like to share with you today. Another interesting aspect of this Western Ghats is, when we talk about the mountain ecosystem in the country, we talk about Vindhya ranges, we talk about Himalayas, but we hardly talk about the Western Ghats. It is very interesting to know that the Himalayas were formed 200 crore years ago, whereas the Western Ghats was formed 360 crore years ago. That is, Western Ghats is almost twice the age of Himalayas. And the Western Ghats were formed not when India was part of Asia. I don't know if you really have looked into the how the earth was formed and the kind of continents that were there. There was a continent called Gondwana. The Antarctica, Indian subcontinent, and Australia, they were part of one landmass. It was called Gondwana. And 350 years ago, they started separating. And they started, the Indian subcontinent started moving upwards from the Antarctica, got separated from Antarctica, and the Australia moved down southwards. And when the Indian subcontinent hit the Asian subcontinent, that is when the Himalayan ranges were created. And the Himalayan ranges, that was created over a couple of crores of years. So this is probably one of the oldest mountain ranges that you see. And there's always a debate. People say that they are not really mountain ranges, they are faulted edge of Deccan Plateau. These kind of arguments have been there. But as far as I am concerned, when you have elevated landmass and then you have this kind of biodiversity, it is supposed to be called a mountain. And the importance of this Western Ghat is something that I would like to talk about. Well, as I said, that it extends all the way from Kanyakumari to Gujarat, and it covers a distance of something like 1,600 kilometers, and the average elevation, it's not 600, it is around 1,200 meters is the average elevation of Western Ghats. And this is the most important aspect of it. All the important rivers, South Indian rivers, whether it is east flowing or west flowing, they all take birth in Western Ghats. Every single river, it takes birth in Western Ghats. And another important aspect of the Western Ghats is, if you didn't have this Western Ghats, then there would have been nothing to stop the monsoon clouds. And the monsoon, probably in India, monsoon is the most talked about kind of subject, because the lifeline of the whole country depends on a good monsoon. If you had a bad monsoon, your economy is shattered that year. So the entire rainfall in the southern parts of India happens basically because of the mountain ranges that we have. And the scary part of that is, if you really see the 200 years ago, the total amount of forest cover that we had, if you really compare it with what it was 200 years ago, today we have only 7% of the forest cover left. That means, we have lost more than 90% of the green cover or the forest cover that we had in the Western Ghats. If there are any forest left, it's in parts of Kerala and parts of Karnataka. There is hardly anything in Maharashtra or in Gujarat. You have the mountain ranges, but there is no trees at all, absolutely no forest and no trees. Very rarely you find trees or trees in those areas. And even, say for example, the district of Uttar Kannada, in the when we got independence in 1947, in 1950 there was a survey that was done. 80% of the district was covered with forest. Guess how much it is today, Uttar Kannada? It's come down to about 25 to 30%. That means almost, whatever forest is left, twice that forest has been lost ever since we got independence. So most of this denudation of the forest is happening to basically meet various requirements of the growing population that we have in the country. I just have some pictures. Rather than me telling you something, the pictures speak of the richness of the kind of Western Ghats that we have. We have the Shola forest, like, you have those kind of peaks. You find them in Kudremukh, you find them in Coorg. This kind of Shola forest where you have the grasslands and you have very rich, the forest cover in the valleys. And this becomes very important, if you really look at the food cycle, you have animals which live on this kind of grass, and you have carnivorous animal which feed on those animals. So the nature gives enough for all sorts of the life forms that we have. So this is an important part of the Western Ghats, the Shola forest, and this kind of Shola forest you hardly find anywhere on earth. It's a very unique feature of the Western Ghats, and you see the kind of mountain ranges, you have the mountains, you have the agricultural practices that is happening along these mountains, and then you have the tea gardens, which is not really a good activity because we have been cutting down forest, but that's a reality. You see, especially in Coorg, where we used to grow only coffee, and when for growing coffee you require a lot of shade, so you always ensure that there are certain number of trees, but growing this tea, we have removed so much of forest cover already there. Then you have such kind of peaks, and they're wonderful picnic spots and wonderful spots for trekking. For centuries, people have been exploring and exploring these kind of places, and every other day you find a new such place. And then if you really look at the richness of this area, the flora and fauna, you see so many different types of animals that they live in Western Ghats. When I talk about this, I would like to just share a small story that was told by one of my friend. I don't know if many of you are aware, by name Nagesh Hegde. He used to be the editor of Sudha and Prajavani. And he has written several books on Western Ghats. Recently, about a month ago, there was a book that was published called Apurva Paschima Ghatta. And this was to commemorate an event that happened 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there was a march called Save the Western Ghats March. The march started from Kanyakumari, went all the way up to Goa, and you had marchers coming from Gujarat coming up to Goa. And it was a 100-day march with about 50 marchers walking for all the 100 days. And from every village to village along the Western Ghat, thousands of people participated in it. Our records show that something like 2.5 lakh people participated in that Save the Western Ghat march 30 years ago. On 15th of December 1987, this Padayatra was flagged off from Talakaveri, which is not too far from here. You go from Puttur to Coorg and you have the Talakaveri where the river Kaveri takes birth. And we went back 30 years later. On the 15th of December, we went there, and this book was published by, released on that day at Talakaveri, commemorating the event that happened 30 years ago. And that march went for 45 days in Karnataka. So that was one of the reasons why I requested the organizers here, saying that it's happening and this is something that needs to be communicated to the younger generation, that such things happen to protect the environment. Now on the 15th of December, we went to a school in Bhagamandla, and when we were interacting with the children, Nagesh Hegde told a story, very interesting. There is a bird called Arctic tern. Its habitat is Arctic Ocean, the northern parts of Arctic Ocean. That is where it lives. And it migrates from Arctic Ocean all the way up to South Pole. Do you have any idea what is the distance? It's about 14 to 14,500 kilometers. And this bird, once it takes off from Arctic Ocean, it doesn't stop. It lands only in South Pole. 14,000 kilometers. This is just a 2 feet by 3 feet kind of, it's a big bird, 2 feet by 3 feet kind of size. But I don't know where it gets its energy from, flying all the way from this. Now, that's not the point that I'm trying to make. Now the story is that when the Arctic birds, they were migrating, normally what happens, as children, when we went on a picnic or we went on a excursion, school would have conducted some tour, the students or the teachers would have expected that, you have to write an essay when you come back, what all you found, right? And this mother bird asked the younger one that, all along the route, you have to record what all you see. So it started from Arctic Ocean. There were probably about half a dozen different types of tree species that it was able to find, half a dozen different types of, the animals. And then it came down to Siberia. And then, you could find many of those, those bears that you find in cold conditions. Started recording that. It came to Kazakhstan. And when it came to Kazakhstan, there was a lot more, the flora and fauna that it was able to record it. But 15, 16, 20. But when it flew over Western Ghats, it became very restless because every minute it has to write a new thing. Every minute. You'll be surprised to find the kind of flora and fauna that exist in Western Ghats. I will give you the numbers a little later. These are some of the rare animals that you find. This is the, you have the mountain goat, the cheetah, and then, this is how the amphibians, these are the tadpoles, the amphibians, they lay their eggs and these tadpoles come out. And you have, these are all very strange kind of animals that you find. And many of these animals are endemic to Western Ghats. That means you can find them only in Western Ghats and nowhere else. You see, there are varieties and varieties of fish that you can find. There are hundreds and hundreds of varieties of butterflies, the kind of snakes and the other leopards that what do you call those kind of creeps. And then you have the insect varieties. And then this is home for the great Indian elephants. But this is a picture that is very interesting. You see on the back the kind of richness of the kind of forest, the mountain ranges. But then you also see that the human greed has cut down the kind of rich forest that we had. And now the forest, the dwindling of the forest is to such an extent that animals have to really come to the agricultural fields looking for food. So this is another picture of the great Indian elephant. And then of course the rare tigers. If you have seen today's Hindu, has anybody read Hindu today? Newspaper? The very front page has a picture of this tiger crossing the road. Why should they be crossing the road? Why should they? They should be inside the forest, right? But the way we have cut down the forest, we have made these kind of animals to come into the cities and where the human habitation has been there. And this kind of, tigers, you can't see it anywhere else except in some parts of India, but mostly in Western Ghats. And the flora, you would be surprised to know that the kind of varieties of trees, plants, shrubs, flowering plants, non-flowering plants, orchids, it's unparalleled. Something like 25% of the various different types of species that are there at the global level are here in Western Ghats. And many of them are, as I said, are endemic species. Say, for example, you talk about some of the flowering species. You have something like 7,000 different types of flowering plants in Western Ghats. 7,000. I don't think any other forest, any other ecosystem has that many number of flowering plants. And then you have something like 1,500 different types of non-flowering plants. And then you have orchids. Runs into probably a couple of thousands different types of orchids, which are there in the Western Ghats. So just give you an idea, you have something like 140 mammal species. One of them is called, it's a monkey called Singhalika. I don't know if you have heard of it, Singhalika. It has a lion's face. That is why it is called Singhalika. And it has a very large, long tail. It's called lion-tailed macaque. This is unique. You don't find that lion-tailed macaque anywhere on earth except in Western Ghats. And you have 510 different types of bird species, 260 types of